Welcome to the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society. Welcome to ITSP Magazine. You're listening to a new episode of Stories from Space podcast, where your host, Matthew Williams, examines the history of human spaceflight, the breakthroughs that revolutionized our understanding of the universe and our place in it, and the brave individuals who work tirelessly to advance the frontiers of our understanding. Knowledge is power, now more than ever.
The authors acknowledge that this podcast was recorded on the traditional unceded lands of the Lekwungen peoples. Good afternoon. Welcome back to Stories from Space. I'm your host, Matt Williams. And today, joining me in the booth is Mclee Kerolle, who is the Deputy Executive Director of the Space Court Foundation. Mclee, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. It's nice to be here.
Nice to have you on. Now, listeners may recall in a previous episode, we had other members of the Space Court Foundation on, and they were speaking about what they will be doing this year in Paris. Mclee is here with us today to discuss their other efforts, their other outreach, and why this is extremely important in today's world, where we find ourselves in a sort of renewed space age and with new opportunities to do it better and to do it right. So is that a fair assessment of your efforts, of what the Space Court Foundation does?
Yeah, that's a spot on assessment, because we're all about promoting and supporting the rule of space law education, because, a lot of people don't know space law even existed, or space law has been a thing. Space law has been around since at least the 1960s, from the Outer Space Treaty of 1967. So it's very important for us to promote and put this out there. And on top of that, what Space Court does that's I think is really cool is our internship program. We give students around the world the opportunity to engage in space law, because it's one thing to just push the theory of space law, but it's a completely other thing to actually act on it. So that's something that I'm very proud about that Space Court does.
Yeah, and in fact, this goes to the heart of a lot of questions that I have for you today, which is the outreach and the internships and the educational series. When talking to Nathan and Chris last time, we touched on this, but I have a feeling you can tell us so much more. So the shows that you guys do, there is the Stellar Decisis, which is the mock court, the Spacebar show, and something that is very, very interesting too. This is a major series that you guys recently launched, which is the Women of Color in Space series. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Now, what can you tell us about that?
Yeah, that's something that's very, very dear to my heart. The Women of Color in Space series was started by me and my colleague, Navidita, Nivi for short. And the whole focus of that is just to increase accessibility to space law and policy and highlight women of color in the industry. I'm sure a lot of people have seen the Hidden Figures, women are very, very important part of the industry. And these women of colors, even to this day, are still trailblazers in the field that a lot of people don't know about. So our whole ideal is to just give them the spotlight that they deserve, because they are unsung heroes in the industry.
And well, yeah, for any listeners who haven't seen this film, Hidden Figures, and it's based off a novel, this credited several pioneering women of color who worked for NASA during the early 1960s. Then, and they were computers, and they performed all manner of math and analysis there, and they helped the Mercury program and all of the things that spun off from that, Gemini, Apollo, and yet there were individuals whom most people could not name or even
exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
Well, so then this series, this is the same idea, right? We're drawing attention to people who are making a big difference, battling greater barriers, because just to get there, it requires that they have to overcome a lot more than their colleagues in terms of attitudes and access.
And we encourage them. Yeah, we encourage them to actually talk about and express the difficulties they face as trailblazers in the scene, in the field, because from the outside looking in, you always hear about the end of the success stories. You don't really hear about the hardships that happen. So we think that it's really important for people who are interested in the space industry to hear that. So the cool thing about the Women of Color, even though we're a Space Corps Foundation, we focus on space law and policy. With this series, we actually focus on every part of the space industry. So I think that's it's great work that Nivi and the rest of the Space Corps team have done.
The first episode, or the first interview that you guys did, that was with Rivimbo Samanga. And I remember the last time we had a chance to talk, that was sort of imminent. The episode where she was featured and telling her story. But now there's a series of different women there who were featured or were talked about. Yeah, and they are, let's see, Ale Pacini?
Yep, she works with the Women for Space for UNOSA, for the UN. So yeah, we've had a lot of who's in the industry.
Yeah.
And let me just to shout out Ruvumbo, I know she was named CNN's top women in space in Africa. So that's a real great accolade. I know we also had Deepika J. Cody from Airbus, Gina M. Halabi too. Yeah, we've had it's really a who's in the space industry. And I know we had one of your colleagues, Vera, who did space architecture from Mars Society. Yeah. So one of our big videos, one of our most viewed videos.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Well, yeah. Vera Muliani is Mars City Design, and yeah, well, her membership is long and extensive, but her flagship is Mars City Design, and in fact, she is featured in another episode of the series. Yeah, we had a chance to work together to create a separate podcast about people living on Mars in the future, and that was very fun. A few celebrity voiceovers were in there, and
nice.
Yeah, and also me for some reason. I did one character, but you kind of insist on it there when you're writing these people and trying to bring them to life. It's like I want to do their voice.
Don't sell yourself short, Matt. You're definitely a celebrity in the field too. You know, part of this is history in the making. This is what we're experiencing. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you just gave me the perfect launching point for the next thing. So in terms of space law, now you already said it. I would say perfectly there. It's like this is something that most people today really know nothing about. If we were to say this, it's like, well, there's laws in space, and it's like, yes, there are treaties, but there's so much that we don't yet have, a legal framework for, and there's so much concern about space becoming some kind of Wild West issue. So, I mean, this was the reason why Space Court was founded, wasn't it?
Yes, definitely. Because we want to avoid like a Wild West. And personally, I think we want to avoid something. We want to avoid a colonialism 2.0. You don't want to have the same problems that we had here on Earth occur in space. So it's best to get in front of that. And, something that you see in the space industry is that the rate of technology goes a lot more faster than the laws and regulations. So that's why it's kind of important for us to be placed in front of that right now.
Yeah. So would it be fair to say that it's like on the one hand, you guys are looking to try to get all existing space law into one place so that people can know what it is, but at the same time, foster discussion so that the policies that don't yet exist can be formulated?
Yes, that's spot on. We actually, when you're talking about placing everything in one space, we've been working on a space law library. So, no matter where you are in the world, because even though there's a big international treaty and the Outer Space Treaty, each country has their own national laws. And that will happen in terms of licensing and liability, even how they handle things like space debris and stuff like that. So and some countries don't have these laws in place yet. So it's important to see what's happening and where it's happening. And then, you can compare and analogize.
So what kind of scenarios would you say? Because this is what Stellar Decisis does there, right? You have people in these videos there, or a court in these videos discussing a recent incident or ruling, and they're arguing right in front of a judge. What do you imagine the likely scenarios are going to be like that? So in the near future, like with the commercialization of low Earth orbit.
And just to give the listeners some context, Stellar Decisis takes place in the far future because there actually hasn't been, many actual cases dealing with space yet. But, it will happen. And yeah, it could be anything from two satellites crashing into each other and like, whose fault is it? Is it country A or country B? Or you could have things when even you'll see it in our stellar devices in our actual trailer, there's a lunar basis set up. And then if an accident happens and it ricochets and causes a chain effect, lunar bases, which are usually international projects, it's like, well, yeah. So with the country A, B, C, or D, who takes responsibility for it? There's a lot of stuff that will probably be happening in the future.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that is a good like smattering of like the concerns. You mentioned space debris earlier and like orbital space law, and that is a major concern. I know I'm constantly seeing people, someone has written about this, they're talking about the situation, and yeah, I see there's a lot of anxiety about that. It's like, oh God, we need to figure out how we're going to do this before we do it. And the moon, I mean, right now there is a lot of concern about what if China lays claim to this area, right? Or, what if anyone does? What if Russia and China, claim certain spots and we have to claim other spots? And how's that going to work out? And yeah, there's a lot of anxiety.
Is a big issue. Yeah. And as you know, I'm not sure if your viewers know about or your listeners know about too, the Artemis Accords is something big that's happening in the space industry. And it's in anticipation of humanity's return to the moon. And, we had Apollo, and now we have Artemis, Apollo's sister. It's actually going to bring the first woman on the moon and the first person of color on the moon. So that's something to be really excited for. And like the US is leading that front, but we have a lot of countries that have signed on to it, including Japan, Brazil, Luxembourg, a lot of countries.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah. And I remember last time we talked, Russia had said they wouldn't be signing because they felt it was too U.S. centric. Mm-hmm. They've since partnered with China to say we're going to be doing our own program, and they called it the International Lunar Research Station. There's not a lot of details available on what exactly that's going to look like there, but yeah, the fact that they said we're not doing this, and since then, we're going with this. I mean, that too. Is that a cause for concern?
Well, yeah. I mean, I've talked to a lot of people in the space industry, and people do think there's a space war almost brewing. But I think that might be like a Chicken Little sky is falling thing right now. Like, if you assume positive intent, hopefully some positive things come out of it. The thing is about the moon is like there's limited space on the moon, and that's where you could see there will be some conflict. But I don't see why not. There can be some kind of agreement between everyone who's doing the Artemis party and everyone on the Russia and China side to reduce conflict, because that's something we do not want. There's no need for us to bring conflicts from Earth to the moon. Like you can see on the ISS, there's very rarely you hear about any kind of tension on ISS, even though recently things might have been changing, but you rarely hear about that. Like Russian astronauts are friendly with American astronauts. So there's no reason why we can't have that kind of relationship on the moon.
Well, yeah, I'm glad you brought up that example, because that's what came to mind for me. And this being another major development, which I'm sure everyone listening is familiar with, how the Russian invasion of Ukraine has set cooperation in space back considerably. And Rogozin, the head of Roscosmos there, he's made multiple boasts and threats online about how, Russia's going to pull out of the ISS. Good luck keeping it up there without us. But there's no actual indication they're going anywhere. Because,
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, you can't, as the propaganda video showed, just close the hatches and break off. You can't do that. And of course, so like the Outer Space Treaty, it's something that everyone still seems to believe in, which is that nobody can claim anything, because that would be to the detriment of all. We'd get up into a shooting match. Yeah. So the other major thing with regards to the moon and space, right, is commercial interests, because that is not. I would say I've argued elsewhere that it is kind of included in the Outer Space Treaty, but it's not spelled out in black and white that, companies can't assert sovereignty or companies can't claim things. And that's become a bit of a concern too with the Trump administration's executive order saying that, companies can lay claim to resources and extract them and sell them. And so, yeah, would it be fair to say that's a going concern as well?
That is a going concern. It seems like it's almost like a loophole in the Outer Space Treaty, right? Yeah, because the Outer Space Treaty says no country can own anything. A company isn't a country, but then still at the same time, a company is registered at a home country, right? So the Outer Space Treaty does cover that because a company is being represented by a country, so that's still in place. But then, you talk about practicality, actuality versus theory at that point, because if you have the money to set up shop on the moon or Mars, like who's really going to stop you, right? So that's where concern happens in that respect.
Yeah. So yeah, that too. That's a Wild West fear. It's like, well, Elon Musk is definitely going to try to lay claim to Mars if he can, or parts of it. I recall that was the purpose of the Moon Treaty, right? It specifically said companies can't lay claim to the moon, just like countries can't, or parts thereof.
The thing about the Moon Treaty is that most countries, or most spacefaring countries, the big three, the US, Russia, and China, didn't sign it. So most people consider it a failed treaty. It still exists though. There's still some good stuff that can be taken from it, but it's the weakest treaty. It's the weakest link as far as international regulation in space is concerned.
Yeah, and that it even says so in that executive order there, right? We never signed the Moon Treaty. We don't believe in it, so go ahead.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and I liked that about the Artemis Accords. I felt like NASA was trying to say, by the way, we still believe in the whole no sovereignty, neutral thing for all of humanity. So, so yeah, don't believe what this order says too much. Yeah, but yeah, I like that the Outer Space Treaty has that. There is that sort of implied thing there. Anybody who's operating within a space agency's area is answerable to that government, and the government can't make any sovereign claims. So it's like,
really forward thinking. It was really, really beautiful. Like there's people who really love the Constitution and are fundamentalists of the Constitution. And I never really understood that until I got into space law. And then I started reading about the Outer Space Treaty. I was like, wow, it's actually a really beautiful document and how it thought about the future moving forward. Now, when you were talking about Mars, it reminded me, do you remember there was some news like maybe 1 or 2 years ago about Starlink's terms and condition? And then they had there was a blurb about even though it's Starlink and, it's for internet and the satellites on Earth, there was a blurb about going to Mars, and anyone who goes to Mars will be under the jurisdiction of SpaceX. And it's, some people were scared, but it's really a because you can't just write international law in your terms and conditions. You can't just circumvent it like that. But it was real funny though.
I totally remember that. Yeah, it's like users must recognize Mars as a free state or whatever. It's like, whoa.
Yeah.
Okay, Elon's manifesto here.
In fine print, in small print. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That is a very neat thing. And it will, all of this is going to make for some very interesting developments moving forward, isn't it?
For sure.
Yeah. And in fact, the conversations that I hear people having from a bunch of different sectors, like, for example, the Kepler Space Institute, they are working on certification for space medicine, which doesn't exist yet. And that's a major question. And one of the biggest things is the legal aspects, right? If somebody gets sick on the moon or needs emergency surgery, a doctor, well, they need to be certified with some kind of authority in order to perform surgery and not, be arrested afterwards in case they made a mistake or whatever. Because, it's like someone's going to want that doctor's head because, you were supposed to save my person here, but didn't. And it's like, so how can we do something like that? Because if they can't legally perform surgery or medical practices, then, well, they may choose not to, right? And in a recent conversation, Frank White mentioned about we need to figure out a lot of things moving forward, like how we're going to live out in space, and from a health standpoint, from sustainability standpoint. And you guys are talking about the legal aspects, and it's like, it's very impressive, isn't it? There's this big convergence of we need to figure out all these things if we're going to be out in space. Yeah.
Yeah, it is a lot of work. And I think what people fail to realize is whatever we have here on our planet, there's like literally whatever we have here on our planet, there's an exact analog for that in space, or there'll be need for an analog for that in space. So like such things like space medicine, space law, even space fashion, right? Like for space suits or things for, you know, so something sustainable. If you're going to live there, you might not want to be rocking a straight up astronaut suit the whole time. There's just things of that in even food, right? And space agriculture, all these things that we have on Earth, there's definitely going to be a need for that in space. So that's why I like to tell people that space is literally for everyone. You don't need to be a scientist. You don't even need a law degree to be involved in the space industry.
Yeah, you got to care.
Yeah,
but really. Obviously, we do need some people with, you know, strong legal backgrounds. Like yourself, because the rest of us we're amateurs. Speaking of which, you have a very strong and tailored background in space law. You went to the International Institute of the Air and Space Law at Leiden University, or rather, sorry, you're a graduate of that university. That's in Holland, isn't it?
Yep, Leiden. Yep, it's in the better land of the Netherlands. One of the, I love that place. It was a great program. And at the time, there was only one of 4 in the world where you could get certified. Mississippi, which people don't know this, they have the longest running space law legal journal. There's one in Nebraska for people who are into the military or cyberspace, because even that's going to be a part of the space infrastructure. And then there's a school in McGill in Canada that's really big into space law.
Yeah, in fact, I think Nathan or Chris was saying that's currently that they have one of, or if not one of the biggest library when it comes to space law. Yeah.
Bill, yep.
Yeah, okay. Well, so while you were at Leiden, you were part of the International Association for the Advancement of Space Safety, the IAASS.
Oh, yeah. So that's part of ESA's Business Incubation Center. And what we focused on there was, when I was working there, was third-party liability in commercial human spaceflight, because, you know, we had Virgin Galactic, Blue Origin do the first commercial flights last year. So that's going to be more commonplace as we move forward. So, and this is something that we need to, there needs to be a legal framework around it, because you passengers aren't astronauts. There's an actual legal definition for what it takes to be an astronaut. So when you're going to have commercial passengers in there, there needs to be something to govern them, just in case, you know, any injuries happen.
Yeah, that's definitely my next question there. So when it comes to space law, I know this applies to where medicine is concerned. The laws that we have right now, they apply to everything up to the Kármán line, right? So if you're flying to suborbit with Virgin Galactic or Blue Origin, well, the flights are rather brief. But if somebody had to perform medicine while they were still up there, it's technically, it's like aviation law. But on the ISS, going to space, going to low Earth orbit, there's a different framework in place. So, yeah, if an astronaut gets sick or hurt, as I understand it, it's like, it's that country's concern. Like their fellow astronauts are responsible for them.
Yes, right? Yes, exactly. Yes. That was an issue as raised because, a lot of the flights will be from the U.S. at this point. Doesn't mean the passengers will be, right? So you could have just from around the world. So you're going to need laws that regulate international passengers happening.
Yeah. Well, and that's really it, isn't it? Yeah. In the future, and then in not too distant future, people are going to be taken off from different parts of the world and going to space with carriers that are registered to this country. And it's like going through all that is going to be so complicated. We need some kind of like a single document that just says, okay, this is what we're doing. And
this is really interesting. Yeah, because when I was at Leiden, my master's thesis was on the regulation of commercial spaceports, because that's going to be the foundation. That's where everyone, for those who don't know, everyone who will be flying into space will be flying from a spaceport. So you need, and people think, the laws really matter just once you're on the launch vehicle and into space. But like an airport, there's laws and regulations that to cover people on the ground, right? So you're gonna have you just even like labor laws, right, for people who are working the actual ground of the spaceport, and you need things. Space insurance becomes a thing in that matter too. There's like I said earlier, anything that we have on Earth, there's going to be an analog for it for space, even when we haven't left the planet yet. There's going to be those laws will come into play.
Oh yeah, because these people are responsible for getting you on there. So it's like before you fly, you're made aware of certain rules and conditions, right? It's like, yeah, we're responsible for you, so we need you to understand how that works, and it occurred to me, satellites, right? If they're colliding in liability, it's like, man, it's just like traffic laws and car insurance, isn't it?
Exactly.
Yeah. I wonder if they'll have no fault liability insurance there, or it's like, no, you definitely failed the signal here. You failed to file a renewed flight plan with whoever, and that's yet another thing. Flight plans.
yeah. Space traffic awareness and space traffic management are going to be really, really big issues once more people start going up there. Reminds me, every time I think about that, it reminds me of the Expanse, and like you have to have a transponder that for space situational awareness to make sure you're not going into other people's orbits. Yeah, there's some really exciting stuff.
Yeah. In a way, this is all like what was once explored in fiction is now fast becoming a matter of fact, right? Yeah. I mean, these discussions have been happening for years, but not in a serious legal way. They've been the stuff of speculation. Oh, that is neat. It's always seems really exciting when that starts to happen too, doesn't it?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So, in terms of the near future, are there other plans for the Space Corps Foundation? Are there new areas that you guys want to expand into? For example, the interview series. Do you have any more segments like that, like Women of Color in Space lined up, and any?
Yeah, so we plan on going into season 2 of the Women of Color series, and then in fact, I just want to interview people of color, right? Because like it's important to have more people that look like me and get recognized for their talents to be in the space industry. So that's something that's super important. Like we've touched on earlier, the Stellar Decisis is going to be coming, and the Space Bar show. Outside of a Space Corps, if I could plug this, I'm actually developing a space game show, which will be cool. Yeah, it's like just a friendly competition. We'll be covering the topics of the week, and so I'm really excited about that.
Okay, that sounds like fun.
Yeah, and the whole point is to get just an average person interested in the space, right? Because like the theme of this is that space is for everyone. So you want to get more people aware of what's happening in the industry.
Well, yeah, I don't feel like I did that justice there, that trend earlier, right? Because that's really a major point here, right? Is that space is becoming a lot more accessible. It's like the representation is actually beginning, not nowhere close to being complete, but it's beginning to represent the reality of the world, right? It's like space is not for Americans and Russians alone. It's not for white men alone. There are more space agencies than ever before. There's commercial space entities, and there are people who are working in the education, law, and outreach stuff coming from all continents. And yeah, personally, I find that really inspiring, because it's like, well, for one, going to space is inspiring, knowing that this is something that everyone will be able to do. Or at least that's what these efforts are designed for. Yeah, knowing that would be the reality is really, really encouraging. It's like, maybe we don't suck after all, Yeah.
It is a beautiful thing to think about. And I like to think about it in this way, like there is literally enough space in space for everyone. Like the universe keeps expanding. There's enough for everybody. So I would love to just see more people getting a piece of that pie.
Can I quote you on that? I mean,
for sure.
Yeah. I mean, well, it's going to be part of the airwaves soon enough, but that is brilliant. There's enough space for everyone. And yes, the universe is constantly making more space. It's not like Earth where there's a limit to the real estate, right?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's good. I like that. Okay. Definitely want to quote you on that as many times as I can there. Okay. Well, yes, Mclee, thank you so much there for coming on and joining us and, talking to the viewers about all this stuff there. And in the future, I would like to get you and, in fact, a few people on to talk about space law and space medicine and all the different aspects of it, because it's like with so many people having the same message, just different subjects. Yeah, it's like, let's get our heads together and talk about what this is going to look like. And I'm just going to hang back and take notes and try to turn that into a novel at some point.
Yeah, that'd be awesome. I'd read it. I would definitely read it. And, thanks for having me on, Matt. It's always a pleasure talking to you.
Yeah, you too. Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for listening. I'm Matt Williams. This has been Stories from Space. Have a good one.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Stories from Space podcast with Matthew Williams. If you learned something new and this podcast made you think, then share itspmagazine.com with your friends, family, and colleagues. If you represent a company and wish to associate your brand with our conversations, sponsor one or more of our podcast channels. We hope you will come back for more stories and follow us on our journey. You can always find us at the intersection of technology, cybersecurity, and society.